Hey folks, this is Kalani. We have an exciting week to break down for the patch 9.1 PTR. We may have a leak of the patch's release date. Lots of new cosmetic options and items are coming. There's going to be a way to send Soul Ash over to your other characters. We have a clearer picture of what the item level of various reward systems is going to look like. And we have some incredible unique weapon models to preview. What are we waiting for? Let's jump right in. Let's kick things off with a potential release date leak for patch 9.1. From what I understand, a Chinese streamer heard from one of the staff members at NetEase that patch 9.1 should go live on July 1st. That's about the extent of the rumor, but it might hold at least a little bit of weight. NetEase is the company that handles the operation of World of Warcraft in China, so it would make sense that some of their staff know the planned release date, or at least a narrow release window for the next major content patch, because they're going to have to push the patch for their servers. That's about the only credibility this leak has, but July 1st could actually make sense for a few other reasons. Now, before you point out that July 1st will be a Thursday this year, while we all know that patch day is Tuesday, always has been, apparently always will be, the reset day and patch day for Asian servers is actually Thursday. It's Tuesday for North American realms, Wednesday for European realms, and then Thursday for the Asian realms. So because this entire conversation happened between players on the Asian realms, it would be a safe bet that they were talking about their own reset day. So even though July 1st is a Thursday, that week could still be the release week for patch 9.1. That would also make the North American release date June 29th to be that Tuesday beforehand. Now, if you told me June 29th would be the release date for patch 9.1 a week ago, I would have told you you were crazy, mainly because of the Burning Crusade Classic. We knew that there would be a significant gap between the release of TBC Classic and patch 9.1, because Ian Hazacosta said so in his interview with Preach. They don't want to cause any gameplay overlap between the two versions of the game if they can avoid it, so they will give players enough time with one release before pushing the other. The expectation from most players was that TBC Classic would come first because patch 9.1 doesn't really look anywhere near ready. Many players didn't expect to see TBC Classic launch anytime soon, which also meant players didn't really expect to see 9.1 anytime soon after. Even when the launcher was updated early with the release date of June 1st for TBC Classic, people still didn't believe it. But here we are with an official confirmation. TBC Classic will release on June 1st and the pre-patch will start May 18th. So that kind of came out of left field, and I still think it's a bit too soon, but my main point here is with TBC Classic releasing on June 1st for sure, we can start talking about how long a significant gap between releases is. How long do you think players need to get through the leveling process in TBC Classic, run a few dungeons, maybe poke their heads into a raid or two, get bored, and then head back to retail to play patch 9.1? I think a month is a good time frame for most of that. 1 month from the release date of TBC Classic would be July 1st or June 29th. That's 4 weeks to get your TBC Classic adventures out of the way. For most players, that's probably enough. I also think the dev team will want to get patch 9.1 out as quickly as possible to try and get the Shadowlands expansion back on track. This is the longest an expansion has ever gone without receiving its first major content patch. We're almost 7 months in without a content patch. That's kind of crazy, and even though there are various good reasons why the patch could be delayed, a content drought is a content drought. It doesn't matter if it's at the start or at the end of an expansion. If players don't have anything to do, they'll stop playing. The only thing that's going to bring them back is a big dollop of fresh content. Taking a significant gap between TBC Classic and patch 9.1 into account, I think June 29th is actually the earliest the dev team can push out 9.1 now, so that's probably a date they're aiming for. That date also gives the PTR cycle almost 2 more months of testing. That's enough time to get the rest of the raid bosses tested on Mythic, Heroic, and Normal, and the PTR is being updated every single week with more class changes, new content, new items and models, systems are being tweaked and tuned, and everything is coming together quite nicely. I know the dev team said that a June release date would be optimistic, but there is a big difference between the start of June and the end of June, and even if we don't get the patch on June 29th, I I could see the patch landing on July 6th, the week right after, quite easily. That's just after the July 4th holiday for the Americans as well, so it's a perfect time to release some new content into the World of Warcraft. I don't know how much credit the leak is worth, but personally I think the timeline is actually quite likely. If I was a betting man, I'd put my money on a June 29th or a July 6th release date for patch 9.1, which means we probably have quite a bit to wait still. Now moving on to talk about the actual build, a really exciting change in this week's build was the addition of some unique weapon models. The Sylvanas bow got a snazzy update and also is now marked as a legendary in the game files apparently, which is going to make things rather interesting. I assume this bow won't take up your one legendary slot for Shadowlands, otherwise it would make hunter legendary choices kind of weird, but it looks pretty awesome and definitely something that Sylvanas would be using and would drop upon her defeat. I can't wait to see how that fight looks, but at least the loot is going to look amazing. Anyone hunting after Sylvanas' special bow should also be very happy to hear that the special quiver backslot item also has a unique model, and yes, it is actually a quiver. This should fit in quite well with the new more themed raid sets, any of the new more themed armor from the variety of other sources, and of course the bow itself. There are lots of different colours available for the quiver, and at least 4 of them should be made available from the 4 different raid difficulties, so at least one of them should fit quite nicely with your overall transmog. If you've been keeping up with the PTR progress at all, you might know that Sylvanas also drops a dagger, which has also been given a unique model. This dagger looks fantastic, and it looks very similar to the weapons Sylvanas used in the BFA cinematic when she fought against Sarfang. I guess Sylvanas is just dropping all of her shiny stuff in the new raid, and these daggers should make all of the rogues incredibly happy. It's almost a shame that the 2 unique weapons have such limited scope for use. The bow can only be used by hunters, and the daggers can only be used by rogues. An interesting choice for sure. And then this one isn't quite as special as the others, but it still looks absolutely awesome. This is a one-handed sword from the new raid, which might look a bit familiar to anyone who wanted a rune blade from Naxxramas back in the day. It looks like an updated version of the Slayer of the Lifeless, which is amazing. Everyone is going to want to get their hands on this transmog for sure. Moving on, this latest build also contained a handful of class changes to keep the ball rolling on nerfs and buffs. There aren't too many here, and there aren't really any new classes getting attention. Sorry, it's the Balanced Druids and Affliction Warlocks once again. For the Balanced Druids, New Moon and Half Moon damage have been increased by 33%. I guess they really want us to use that talent again, huh? Or at least make it a bit better so it doesn't feel absolutely terrible to use. I still don't think this will push the talent ahead of the others, but any buff is a good buff, right? They also unnerfed the Solstice talent just a little bit. It's now going to be shooting stars fall 250% more often instead of 300%. In a previous build that was knocked down to 200%, so it's back up 50%, which is better than nothing I suppose, but Solstice will still be a bit worse in patch 9.1 if nothing else changes. And then the Stellar Drift talent has been changed slightly again. It will now increase starfall damage by 50% up from 25%, but the 15-second cooldown imposed on starfall is still there. So this talent is probably still completely dead as long as that cooldown is attached to the talent. And then Affliction is still getting tweaks and changes too. Shadow Embrace now lasts for 16 seconds, up from 12 seconds, and it can once again be applied to multiple targets, so that's one more change the dev team has decided to revert. Remember though that in patch 9.1 Shadow Embrace is a talent instead of a passive now, so it's going to be an optional thing. The new conduit that was recently introduced, Withering Bolt, has also been nerfed already. Shadow Bolt deals 20% more damage per damage over time effect on your target, down from about the 33% baseline it was previously, and then they've also halved it for Drain Soul. So if you're still running the Drain Soul talent, you won't get anywhere near as much benefit from this new conduit, which might be the point. The dev team might want to provide extra options for Affliction Warlocks and their talent choices, but with so many changes coming through every week, it's hard to say how both of these specs will look by the time the PTR is over and patch 9.1 has arrived on live servers, so keep an eye out for more changes to come. I feel kind of bad for some of the classes which haven't seen any changes whatsoever at this point in the PTR cycle, while Balanced Druid and Affliction Warlock seem to make it into every single week's patch notes. Obviously, they want to make sure these two top specs from 9.0 don't completely fall by the wayside, while reducing their overall potential to bring them more in line with other classes, but it feels like they're definitely hogging all the attention right now. Hopefully when these classes are sorted and squared away, the dev teams still have enough time to address some other class and spec concerns. This build also includes data for the new item level bump that's happening in patch 9.1. If you're new to WoW or you didn't play through Legion or BFA when seasons were introduced, every time we get a new raid tier in an expansion, we also start a new season. That means a new PvP season, a new Mythic Plus season with a brand new seasonal affix, but most importantly for this piece of news, item level rewards across the board are increased. For example, in patch 9.1, a normal dungeon will start rewarding you with item level 184 gear, which is a huge step up from what it used to reward at the start of Shadowlands. Heroic dungeons will now reward item level 197 gear, and Mythic dungeons will reward you with 210 item level gear. That also means that rank 1 of the new season's upgradable Mythic gear is item level 210, so that's kind of the new entry item level for Mythic dungeons as a whole. The new Mega Dungeon coming in patch 9.1 is Mythic only to start out with, so the item level of all of the gear that comes from the new dungeon will also be item level 210, but thanks to the new Valor system, this gear will also be upgradable. That is going to be very interesting, because typically a lot of the gear from the Mega Dungeons are quite powerful, and this will be the first time we can get that special new gear at higher item levels right when the Mega Dungeon is introduced. For both Karazhan and Mechagon, we had to wait until Mythic Plus became available for the dungeon, but not this time, so keep an eye out for some of the crazy powerful items and trinkets coming out of this new Mega Dungeon. You might just have a few best in slot pieces to upgrade with your Valor points. And then the most important part of this update is the new item level brackets and range for the entire 12 rank Valor upgrade system. I'll pop a table up on screen because it's much easier to digest that way. Rank 1 will start down at the item level 210 as we already covered. Rank 2 will bump it up to item level 213. Rank 3 is going to be 216. Rank 4 will be 220. Rank 5 is up to 223. Rank 6 is 226. Rank 7 is 229. Rank 8 is 233, rank 9 is 236, rank 10 is 239, rank 11 is going to be 242, and then the highest item level at rank 12 is currently set at 246. If you're curious how these item levels match up to the new raid gear, normal Sanctum of Domination loot is set at item level 226, Heroic is bumped up to item level 239, and then Mythic is item level 252. It is worth noting that the last two bosses will drop gear that is 7 item levels higher than the rest of the raid, just like Castle Nathria, so that puts the highest Mythic gear at item level 259. So you can see, once again, the Mythic Plus upgrade system will cap out at 6 item levels below the typical Mythic Raid item level, so Mythic Raid gear will still become some of the best gear you can find in Season 2 of Shadowlands, especially when you take the new raid-only gems and effects into account, with maybe the exception of a handful of pieces from the new Mega Dungeon. If you don't raid at all, your maximum item level is going to be 246 from loot you get from the dungeon and upgrades, and then the only way to get that coveted 252 gear will be through your weekly vault, so it's the same deal as what we have right now, but item levels will be higher across the board. Moving on, this latest build of the PTR also introduced something very interesting regarding Soul Ash. A new item has been added into the game called Packaged Soul Ash, which would allow you to send Soul Ash to any of your other characters on the same account. So if you wanted to send excess or spare Soul Ash from your main character, because you have all the legendaries and upgrades that you want, over to an alt that you just started to kickstart their legendary creation and upgrading process, you will now be able to do that in patch 9.1. There are a few catches to transferring Soul Ash though. Right now it looks like the only place you can actually buy this item, the packaged Soul Ash, is from a broker in Torghast on floor 5. If you haven't been keeping up with the Torghast changes, floor 5 is now the highest floor you can get to in a typical Torghast run, and that's also the floor where you'll find the boss now. So you have to more or less run through a complete Torghast layer before you are able to get to this vendor and buy your packaged Soul Ash. The next catch is that you will actually be transferring over less soul ash than what the item costs. Apparently, brokers always get their cut, and in this case the cut is 200 soul ash. The item will cost you 1500 soul ash to purchase, but when you open it on an alt you will only receive 1300. It's not that big of a deal, I guess, if you don't have any other uses for the soul ash on your main character, but that is something to take into consideration when you're calculating how many of these items you'll need to buy to let your alts upgrade their legendaries as quickly as possible. It might cost you 1500 per item you send, but you're only going to get 1300. And then the last hurdle here, you can only buy one of these items at a time. So if you want to buy 5 packaged soul ash to send all of your main soul ash over to an alt, you'll have to run Torghast 5 different times and get to floor 5 on each run you do. Not necessarily a difficult task by any means, especially if you can run this on lower layers to speed up the process, but what a major kerfuffle. They could have added this item to Vanari and just let you buy the item whenever you wanted or needed to, but nope, they had to stick it in Torghast on the last floor of a run and restrict you to buying just one per run. Everything about that decision seems wrong to me and needlessly annoying. Thankfully, your mains will still have a reason to progress through Torghast to collect the new Soul Cinders currency, so if you also want to send over some Soul Ash to your alts, just don't forget to buy some packaged Soul Ash before you finish your weekly Torghast runs. Thankfully, patch 9.1 does introduce an important reward for all Torghast runs, even if you've already earned your soul ash for the week. The new Torghast currency, Tower Knowledge, can be earned for every Torghast run you do, so even if you're running a wing for the 3rd time to get some packaged soul ash to send your ult some legendary powder, you will at least get something for your time spent. Tower Knowledge can be used to unlock traits or talents in the new Torghast only talent tree, the Box of Many Things. But the most recent build on the PTR added something new to Tower Knowledge, a weekly cap. This has appeared in the form of a seasonal cap, just like how Valor and Conquest work, so I assume as the weeks go by, this cap will be expanded upon and we'll be able to earn more and more Tower Knowledge. What this does ultimately mean though is that you will have a hard cap on how quickly you can progress through the Tower Knowledge talent tree, and you will once again get to the point where Torghast yields 0 extra currency rewards for running it multiple times per week. If you cap out on Tower Knowledge for the week, that's kind of it, which is really disappointing in my opinion. I was hoping this new talent system would be open-ended and you can work on it in your own time, but I guess that won't be the case. You might have another reason to want to run some extra Torghast layers in patch 9.1 though. There are new cosmetic shoulder pieces themed after the Maw and the Mawsworn to collect in 9.1. It seems like just shoulder pieces right now, which is kind of odd but also really interesting. I love that they're themed after the Maw too, because that means they should fit in pretty well with the new raid gear sets, which are also all Maw themed. So if you collect enough of these shoulder pieces and a full set of the raid gear, you can maybe swap out your shoulders without breaking up the entire set. That's really cool. They also combine well with the new Maw themed cloak or back pieces that come from various sources in the new Maw. They're going to work fantastic with those new weapons we previewed earlier as well. So what do these shoulder pieces have to do with running more Torghast? Well, we've found 2 sources for these shoulder pieces so far. They have a chance to drop from bosses in Torghast, which is a nice change of pace. Actually getting a reward besides soul ash from Torghast bosses is going to be nice, but then you can also purchase them straight up from the broker on floor 5 for Phantasma. That means you'll have to choose between anima powers and the typical consumables, or a new piece of transmog when you get to the broker on that last floor. I think this is an awesome step forward for Torghast, both increasing the number of cosmetic rewards, or just rewards in general from the system, but also using the Torghast currency for something other than temporary power-ups. While we only have information about these shoulder pieces so far, they could expand upon this and add almost whatever cosmetic rewards they wanted. Pets and mounts immediately come to mind, and I wonder if they could create a new sort of minigame or a different way to play through Torghast, where you know there's a chance for a very expensive cosmetic item to appear on the broker at the end, so you need to prioritize earning more Phantasma and maybe spending less at the first broker to try and save enough for the end of the run. It could mean sacrificing power to make a run harder, but there's also a reward waiting at the end for you if you can push through. They could add lots of other transmog pieces to the list too, or as I said, almost any cosmetic reward in the same kind of way. So when you're running through Torghast in the new patch, keep your eyes peeled for some new stuff to buy. There's no telling what they could add next. Speaking of cosmetic rewards, we also have a whole bunch of extra tints and colours for the cosmetic glasses that are included in the patch 9.1 game files. A handful of these were already previewed and some of them are tied to actual items, so we should be able to find them in game somewhere. Right now we have no idea where they come from, so that's going to be an exciting treasure hunt when the patch releases. But there was a recent wave of new tints and colour combinations that don't have an item name, so they might not make it in for 9.1, which will be a real shame because so many of these look absolutely amazing. I think they could add these transmog items into almost any activity they want, and I'm sure players would work towards collecting them all no matter what they had to do. We've got half moon spectacles, we have clear lenses, rose tinted lenses, sunglasses, silver frames, gold frames, brass frames. There's so much variation in these glasses, I absolutely love it. It's a shame it took so long for cosmetic glasses items to make it into the game in any significant capacity, and especially without holiday restrictions or limitations. I'm looking forward to seeing more customization added into the game, so I hope as many of these colour variations make it into the game as possible. To round things out for this week's list of updates, I just wanted to give you some quick thoughts and feelings about the Sanctum of Domination raid. At this point we've been able to test almost every boss. I think there are only 2 fights which we haven't seen at all. All of the raid environments look amazing, the bosses are in quite different encounter spaces, although there are quite a few where you can fall off the edge. Without getting into too much nitty gritty with mechanics and abilities and spoilers and whatnot, I think each fight does feel quite distinctly different. I don't think there has been a fight that has felt too bad or boring, and this is before seeing the encounters on Mythic, so I'm sure they're going to feel that much more epic when we see the fights on the hardest difficulties. There are quite a few unique mechanics in the Sanctum of Domination, and it's shaping up to be yet another fantastic raid tier. If the Sylvanas encounter ends up being better than the fights we've tested so far, this raid is definitely going to be one to come back to the game for. Even if you don't enjoy any other part of patch 9.1, I personally think the raid will be well worth it all on its own. We've been having an absolute blast testing the new raid, so I just wanted to share that with all you wonderful folks. But that's everything for this week's video. What do you think of the potential release date leak and patch 9.1 may be releasing at the very end of June or the very start of July? How do you feel about package Soul Ash having so many restrictions and hoops to jump through? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to everyone who's subscribed on Twitch. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching, folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.